Greetings, sisters, and welcome to Wonder Woman, Warrior for Peace. My name is Angela, and this is episode 15. It's finally time. The moment we've been waiting for 75 very long years is finally here. The Wonder Woman movie is out! Has it been worth the wait? Does it live up to our expectations? Is it going to catapult Wonder Woman fandom into a glorious new generation? I have no idea. I'm recording this ahead of time. But the plan for this episode is to record the reviews ahead of time, and then I'll go to the Thursday night showing, watch the movie, come straight back home, record, and put out this episode. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. I really hope that that's how it works out. At this point, my biggest concern is coming home and falling asleep while I'm editing the show and waking up like 12 hours later. We are starting out, as usual, with the pre-crisis Wonder Woman Volume 1, Issue 2. The cover date is fall 1942, and I'm reading here that it was released in September. It was written by Charles Moulton, who we know was really William Moulton Marsden, and the art is by Harry G. Peter. And I'm reading this from Wonder Woman Archives, Volume 2. We start with a page with a photo of the four men behind Wonder Woman, giving their background. William Moulton Marsden, who writes as Charles Moulton, H.G. Peter, who draws the art along with a team of 4 assistants, Sheldon Mayer, editor of All American Comics, and M.C. Gaines, All American Comics president and general manager, as well as noting that the picture and caption are the work of associate editor Alice Marble. Next is a splash page, giving the backstory and listing the characters. How Mars, from his iron palace on the planet that bears his name, incites the spirit of war on Earth in order to rule it, and how Wonder Woman is ushering the return of Aphrodite's peace and beauty by fighting for America. It's here we're first introduced to Mars's 3 lieutenants, the Earl of Greed, the Duke of Deception, and the Count of Conquest. Now this issue is actually broken up into 5 individual stories, but the first 4 kind of tell one overarching tale, and you could consider them chapters. So even though it doesn't actually call them that, that's how I'm going to refer to them here. The story starts with Mars getting a report that America is winning the war, thanks to the work of Wonder Woman. He orders his generals to target the man she loves, and in D.C., Major Trevor is given sealed orders, unknown even to Colonel Darnell, and is told to open them only when he's aboard his specially ordered plane. When Diana learns of the mission, she's immediately worried, so she changes into her costume and intercepts Steve at the airfield. She warns him it could be a trap, but he replies that he must follow orders. She respects that, and when he promises to write her, care of Etta Candy, gives him tablets containing the purple healing ray in case he's injured. But days pass without any word from Steve, so she prays to the goddess of love and beauty. Aphrodite appears, telling her supplicant that Steve has been kidnapped by Mars as part of a complex plot to trap the Amazon maiden. Diana declares she will defy the god of war and rescue Steve, and is told that the only ones who can reach Mars's palace are the imprisoned souls of the dead. The goddess gives her a draft of living death that will put her body in a coma and allow her astral self to wander free and surrender to Mars's slavers. After leaving her body with Etta, she does so and is soon taken to the Red Planet in a spaceship. Emphasis on the ship. It's literally an old-fashioned wooden sailing ship that flies through space without any protection from the vacuum. She's less than a model prisoner, but somehow isn't recognized, and once they arrive at the Martian prison, she registers under the name Etta Candy. She passes the strength tests with flying colors, and is entered into a gladiatorial tournament. She learns from her cellmate that a group of captives from Earth arrived the week before, and sure Steve must have been among them, determines to win the games in order to be taken to the palace, where she hopes to learn his location. At the tournament amphitheater, we get a scene formally introducing us to the Earl of Greed, the Count of Conquest, and the Duke of Deception, and learn that, spoiler alert, the Earl is greedy, the Count only cares for conquest, and the Duke's all about deception. The first challenge is a kind of sumo wrestling match, with the combatants' hands tied, and the added detail of the ring being suspended over a pit of fire. Wonder Woman, unwilling to harm her opponent, shoves her cellmate so hard that the girl flies straight over the pit and lands safely beyond, much to the approval of the watching Mars. She continues winning game after game, until in a match against one of the guards, she's tricked into tripping on her chain, but quickly jumps up, breaks the links with no effort, and proceeds to turn the tables on her attacker, which the god of war finds hilarious. Finally, it's sword combat, mounted backwards on a horse, against the men's champion, a guy from the planet Saturn, named, I kid you not, Satan. He even mentions Mephistopheles at one point. His slash at her back is swiftly blocked by her bracelet, and she disarms him, winning the fight. But Mars hears her battle cry referencing the Amazons and Aphrodite, and quickly realizes this must be Wonder Woman. She's taken to the palace all right and placed in a cell, but she manages to overhear the Duke telling the war god to act as if her true identity is still a secret. So when she's brought before Mars, he acts as if the imprisonment was a mistake, and throws a feast in her honor. She's given a slave, and that night after the party learns that the woman used to be the Count's wife, until she dared to laugh at a joke made by one of the Earth prisoners. Something about how one woman could beat up all the Martians. The Amazon realizes that he actually said Wonder Woman, and concludes it must be Steve. They try sneaking to the dungeons, but the sound of the slave's chains alerts a listening spy, who rouses Mars from his bedchamber. He leads a group of soldiers in pursuit, but Wonder Woman has already freed the emaciated Major from his cell. They rush to the spaceship's aerial docking bay, choosing to climb up the tower wall rather than take the slow elevator, and are about to launch one of the Count of Conquest's ships when their pursuers arrive. Vastly outnumbered, Wonder Woman uses her great strength to pull on one of the dock lines, heeling the boat on its side and spilling the Martians back onto the pier. She and Steve take off, Mars yelling vainly that his lieutenants will pursue them. Steve tells his angel that the pilot of his plane turned out to be a spy, who once they were airborne shot the Major and kicked him out without a parachute. But Steve managed to down the purple ray pills the Amazon had given him, so his astral form is able to return to his still living body, having been taken to a hospital. Wonder Woman reawakens in Etta's room, and the Major and the superhero reunite at Holiday College. She tells him the Count's wife returned to her husband, as since she'd escaped he would care about her again, now being something he could conquer, and the Amazon loops Steve in her lasso, compelling him to promise that he'll take her along whenever he goes into danger from here on out. Chapter 2. On the Red Planet, Mars calls his lieutenants together to order them to chase after Wonder Woman. Conquest and Deception come up with excuses, so Greed is given $1 million bribery fund and the fastest ship in the Martian fleet. He sends a mental command via radio to Agent NZI, or I guess technically it could be NZ1, and we get a look at its intended target, Adolf Hitler. He is refusing to attend a Gestapo meeting, sure Himmler is plotting against him, and actually goes into a fit of rage and starts gnawing on his office rug like a rabid dog until he gets the mental command to go to the conference. The effect seems to be subconscious, however, as he acts as if he wasn't told about the meeting and claims intuition is telling him to attend. Meanwhile, in D.C., Darnell presents a coded missive from American Agent X-49 to Steve and Diana, and she translates it to read aloud that at tonight's meeting the Nazis will plan a direct attack on America. Steve, on account of his German skills and blonde hair, is sent to help, and at the airfield Wonder Woman appears and offers him the use of her invisible plane, which will get them to Berlin in hours instead of days. They meet up with X-49, whom the Amazon initially mistakes for a stormtrooper because of his cover, and he sets them up in the room above Hitler's meeting. Spying through a peephole, their eyes, familiar by now with astral bodies, see the Earl standing invisible at one end of the table. Himmler proposes the Nazis attack American subterranean gold vaults, but the Führer thinks that the idea is ridiculous until Greed whispers otherwise in his ear. Wonder Woman is about to lasso Hitler when suddenly the building is rocked by an explosion. Steve is trapped in the rubble, so the superhero grabs him and races back to the invisible plane, dodging Nazi soldiers along the way. She tells the recovering Steve that Greed warned Hitler just before the bomb went off, and they radio Darnell with the news. Back in the office, Diana is secretarying when Etta rushes in, telling her friend that Holiday College is being forced to close due to insufficient funding. The official story is that the war has made investments dry up, but it's also being reported that the college treasurer has mysteriously gone missing. Wonder Woman meets up with the president of the college, Mr. Deacon, who tells her they need a guarantee of $50,000 by tomorrow. The Amazon then finds Etta packing her things, and hears the end of a World Series game on the radio. The pups need only one more game to win, and Wonder Woman has the idea of a charity game of Holiday College against the world champs. Etta says that if the Amazon plays, they're sure to get double what the college needs, so Wonder Woman meets with the ball club president during the next day's game. He likes the idea, but Greed whispers in his ear, convincing him to demand the majority of the ticket sales. But just then, the opposing team pulls ahead at the top of the ninth, and fearing they won't win this final game, the president agrees to a charity game if Wonder Woman bats for the pups. She gets a home run, winning them the championship, and the club president agrees to her terms despite Greed's fury. The invisible Martian then goes to the college embezzler, telling the shadowy figure to follow his instructions to destroy Wonder Woman, or his crimes will be exposed. At the charity game, the stadium is packed with 70,000 cheering fans, and the game goes swimmingly until Wonder Woman takes the plate. Her foul ball ends up in the stands, and a mysterious hand throws back a new ball without anyone noticing. When her bat connects, the baseball explodes, throwing her high into the air, and when she lands, dazed, the strange hand offers her a cup, and she drinks. Etta and the college president are then at her side, but she's unconscious after drinking who knows what. She's taken to the college, but her nurse is attacked, and she's carried through a secret tunnel via stretcher. She ends up in a gold vault, where a masked doctor has her rolled up in a sheet of asbestos, and cast in a giant gold ingot, just her head sticking out, so she can't escape. She awakens to learn this is how she is to be transported back to Mars, but the college nurse manages to free herself and sounds the alarm. Steve, guarding the nearby vaults, orders anti-aircraft guns and goes below to investigate, but is knocked out from behind and is to be given the same Viserys Targaryen spa. But learning he's in danger, Wonder Woman bursts out of the ingot. I guess they forgot that gold is an incredibly soft metal? And rushes to the rescue. She chases their captors back through the tunnel, and they surface at Holiday College, where Etta and her friends help take them out. The masked doctor tries to flee, but Etta tackles him at the same moment Wonder Woman catches him in her lasso. They pull off the mask to find out it's actually President Deacon, who reveals that he killed the treasurer and made off the college funds himself, then closed the school so that the Axis could secretly bring the stolen gold and load it onto the Earl's spaceship. And he would have gotten away with it too, if it weren't for those meddling college kids and their amazing Amazon. But just then, Steve's anti-aircraft guns spot Greed's ship and blow it out of the sky, leaving the Earl with no way to return to the Red Planet, save for the Martian slave ships. Etta shows Wonder Woman the check from the game, and it's over 100,000, and the Amazon wonders if they'll be able to defeat deception and conquest as easily. In the next chapter, the God of War, seeing that the Earl is returning on a convict ship, concludes that he's secured Wonder Woman, but is sorely mistaken. Learning the truth, he orders the Duke of Deception to capture the Amazon. We see that the Duke has a collection of false forms, empty bodies that exactly match an Earthling, that he can jump into and command astrally. He tests out the Wonder Woman form, declaring it perfect before racing off for Earth. We see Greed imprisoned until he can pay Mars 10,000 pounds of gold, and the effects this has on the Earth. Hitler loosens his grip on some of the occupied countries, moving troops to other areas. This gives the American people a false sense of hope, and the sales of war bonds starts to slip. It's decided to invite Wonder Woman to the Bonds Committee, so we next see her at a New York hotel, hosting a show to buy war bonds while I try not to hum the Star-Spangled Man with a plan. The show involves a performance by a dance troupe, and during one dancer's solo, another goes up to Wonder Woman and hands her a dagger. She introduces herself as a native Hawaiian named Naha, and claims that people sympathetic to the Axis are hiding Japanese soldiers in a bid to capture the islands, then says Taki was the one who stabbed her before collapsing. When the lights come up, Wonder Woman is found crouching over the dead body, clutching the dagger. The cops come running, and the Amazon tells them what the girl said about being attacked. It turns out Taki is the dancer's manager, but he claims to have been with the orchestra the whole time. They're both brought in, and she refuses special treatment, sure that justice will be done. Her lasso is taken, but after only 2 hours in her cell, she's told bail has been paid. She meets a Mr. Bost, a lawyer who claims to have been hired by a friend. He gives her lasso and drives them to his house to talk about the case, but when they're having coffee, she recognizes that the white cubes in the bowl are not sugar. She stirs in 3, then tries to force Bost to drink from her cup, but he refuses. She lassos him, but the rope he gave her has no effect. She realizes it's a fake just before the real lasso settles around her shoulders. She turns to see that holding the other end is Naha. The girl laughs, explaining that what Wonder Woman saw die was really one of the Duke of Deception's false forms. She uses the unbreakable lasso to secure the Amazon's arms behind her, then puts a red coat and fake hands on her as well as a big hat, so no one will suspect who she is or realize she's being controlled. To be honest, she kinda looks like Carmen Sandiego. The dancer takes her captive to a private yacht, and they set sail with no one, not even the captain, suspecting a thing. He says they're soon stopping to pick up a pilot who will take them to their rendezvous point. But before Wonder Woman can ask more, she's forced to go to her cabin. There the coat is removed, and she quickly memorizes the room before her feet are secured, and Naha tapes her mouth and eyes shut. Learning their next stop is Mars, Wonder Woman sends a mental radio signal to Edda. When the boat stops, she manages to force the tape off her mouth, but, and I promise you I'm not making this up, her feminine vanity won't let her tear out her eyelashes, so she decides to stay blind. Yeah, A+ writing there, Marsden. Anyway, she hops to where she remembers the window is, and manages to get it open, then squirms her way out. As she splashes into the ocean, Naha spots her and goes in after. And even though Wonder Woman is a better swimmer, the Hawaiian girl catches up, because the Amazon is literally swimming in circles because she can't see. But her still-bound legs are able to kick her pursuer when she gets too close, and Naha happens to land in the speedboat Edda and the Holiday Girls are piloting on their mission to rescue their friend. Wonder Woman forces Naha to turn on the Duke, and she leads the superhero to her apartment, where the false forms are being kept. Seeing her double gives the Amazon an idea, so she has the dancer teach her how to control it, then reports to Darnell before flying to Hawaii with Edda and the native girl. The Duke of Deception, meanwhile, is addressing the Japanese Emperor while in the false form disguise of a general, telling him that now is the perfect time to attack Hawaii, since the Americans are expecting a secret uprising. The Emperor doesn't believe him until a report confirms that Trevor is investigating troops hidden among the native population, so he gives the go-ahead. Naha receives orders from the Duke's astral form. Then we return to Wonder Woman, who's been invited by a native community to be a guest of honor at their festival. But instead of the real superhero, Edda goes in her place, secretly operating the Wonder Woman false form. Her lasso is stolen while she watches the show, and soon she's been caught in its loop and is being dragged away. She's hidden in a cave, but soon the real golden lasso catches one of the guards, and the genuine Wonder Woman takes him to Major Trevor to tell what he knows. He reveals the truth about the hidden spies and tells of the attack by air and sea. With this knowledge, the American forces are able to prepare a trap, and so take out nearly 30 battleships and dozens of bombers, with Wonder Woman and the Holiday Girls lassoing paratroopers while literally standing on the wings of soaring airplanes. After being thanked by the commander, Wonder Woman races to the cave in time to see her false form being tied to a stake, waiting for the Duke to collect her. She switches places with Edda, and when Deception appears, still disguised as a general, she breaks the rope and smashes his false form against the post, literally smacking the Duke's astral body out. He tries escaping on his ship, but she hurls a boulder and, being built for the weaker gravity of the Red Planet, the ship is torn apart, leaving the Duke to flee the planet unaided. Now alone, the two Wonder Women talk, and the real Amazon hopes that this means Deception won't be able to work his lies for a while. In the final chapter, Mars is furious he's lost contact with the Duke. He observes a shipment of women captives from Earth, hoping Wonder Woman is among them. But when one prisoner collapses, he realizes it's the Duke in one of his false forms. Deception is thrown into the same prison as Greed, resulting in the Japanese Emperor speaking honestly about his country's contempt for Italy. But he tells the Italian ambassador that if they can capture Wonder Woman, Japan will help protect them from being subservient to Hitler. While this is going on, the Count of Conquest, in his hidden underground headquarters below Mount Olympus, gets a call from Mars ordering him to capture Wonder Woman and Major Trevor. No, literally, a call on a telephone. From the planet Mars. Yeah. Anyway, he's told by a servant girl that women can't resist Italians, so he goes to Mussolini in astral form, just as the ambassador to Japan brings him the Emperor's message. Conquest whispers in the dictator's ear, and so he sends the handsome Count Crafty and the incredibly strong Momotha on the mission. Conquest takes over Momotha's 8-foot-tall body, testing out its incredible power. We next see the two in the States, having traveled there via false Spanish passports. Momotha has become a boxing champion, while Count Crafty has taken the name Don Unaldi and travels the ranks of American high society, charming every lady he meets. That is until he's at a club where Wonder Woman is selling bonds, when she sees right through his schmooze. But when he invites her to watch Momotha, whom he claims is the world's strongest person, she accepts, knowing it's likely a trap, but wanting to see the giant for herself. She goes to the show in her Diana Prince persona, accompanied by Steve, and they watch as the faux Spaniard demonstrates his power, as well as finishes his first match. Sure, Wonder Woman will be there. It's announced that he will pay $5,000 to anyone who can survive one round in the ring. So Diana makes an excuse to Steve and takes a leaf out of Superman's book by changing in a telephone booth. She does in fact survive the round, then takes them up on their offer of $50,000 to finish the fight, which she says will be split between the USO and the Red Cross. She knocks Momotha out, and the crowd cheers. Then she follows Onaldi to his office to get the check, but he tricks her, using an electronic invention of Mars to freeze her in place. They're hiding her inside a punching bag when Steve comes to investigate, so they knock him out as well and take their prisoners to Conquest's headquarters. He exits Momotha's body and returns to his own, overseeing the welding of chains to Wonder Woman's bracelets. She awakens to find her strength gone, and the two captives are taken to Mars. She's put in the same cell as Greed and Deception, just as they're set free, and she tries contacting Etta and the Holiday Girls mentally to tell them to take the elixir of Aphrodite and catch a prison ship to the Red Planet. Days later, Wonder Woman is taken to the Martian Injustice Court, where she's told every day she defies Mars, Steve will be harmed. But the court is interrupted by the landing of a new slave ship, so she's returned to her cell until the session can be resumed. But that ship also carries Etta Candy, who finds her friend that night and dissolves away her chains with acid. Her strength restored, the Amazon causes a prison break and runs to the palace, where she finds Mars interrogating Steve in his office. They battle, and she's able to throw him into a barrel of explosives, because of course the God of War would keep something like that in his office. And as every video game has taught us, it explodes with the slightest touch. Wonder Woman and her friends escape via spaceship, only looking back to see that the Iron Palace is in flames, since the explosive was designed to set American battleships alight. The story ends back in DC, with Steve asking why Wonder Woman has to leave him, and her explaining that Mars was only set back since his immortality prevents him from being completely overcome. There are still his servants on Earth, and once those are defeated there will need to be new leaders for those he's imprisoned, so the fight is far from over. This is followed by a little 2-page story from Wonder Woman selling war bonds. She learns there's a city called Midland that isn't buying enough, even though there have been plenty of rallies. She goes herself, bringing along a soldier with his arm in a sling, named Buck Winters, and he tells his story when they hear some kids wondering how their spare change can help the war. He tells the crowd how his plane was shot down over the Malayan Peninsula, and he spent weeks struggling through the jungle, with a bad cut on his arm that got infected. He had to hide from snipers until Wonder Woman flew overhead and airdropped a survival pack. He was finally able to eat and patch up his arm with the first aid kit, then stay warm at night with the blanket and jacket. The kit even included a helmet, which kept him alive despite 5 shots to the head. We return to the present, where Wonder Woman has a table spread out with all these items and the prices for a war bond or stamp to send them to the troops overseas. So yeah, in case you somehow missed it, issues of the actual Wonder Woman title were a whole lot longer at this point than her stories in Sensation Comics. I'm not sure how many pages the original issues actually had, but I know with Sensation it would include another story or two with other characters, while this one is 100% Wonder Woman. Plus, I'm sure the fact that it was quarterly instead of just monthly was a big part of it. Either way, I'd gotten the other recaps done before I opened this issue, thinking I could finish it up quickly, and then I saw it just kept going and going and going. I believe this is the first time that William Moulton Marston acknowledged that he was the one writing under the pen name Charles Moulton, so that's pretty cool. And I was surprised to learn about Harry Peters' assistants, so I looked it up and it seems that he was the one doing the penciling, while he had a team of 4 commercial artists who did the inking. I love what they did with the Martians in this one. Their art style is very ancient Rome, mixed with elaborately decorated Flash Gordon-style rocket ships. Plus, of course, the wooden sailing ships that somehow fly through space. Everything about them screams military might. Even Mars's desk here looks like it's made out of a tank. The bomb that goes off in the Nazi conference room, that really reminded me of Operation Valkyrie, which was an attempt by some members of the German nobility to assassinate Hitler by having a briefcase bomb taken into one of his meetings. You may remember there was a movie made about it, about 10 years ago, with Tom Cruise. They actually managed to get the bomb inside and it blew up, but Hitler survived almost entirely unscathed. At first I thought this scene was a reference to that, but this story actually came out about 2 years before that happened, so interesting kind of quasi-prediction there. The scene with Holiday College playing baseball against the World Series champions, it actually goes into a lot of detail. They use all sorts of fancy baseball terms that I learned and then quickly forgot the last time our local team was in the World Series. But I figured the recap was already long enough, so no real point in going into a lot of detail there. The idea of rolling someone up in a sheet of asbestos to keep them alive while being encased in molten metal is such an absolutely ridiculous comic booky thing to do. Kind of reminds me of some old Fantastic Four comics where they would do like behind the scenes with the Human Torch, and he talked about how all his clothes were made from asbestos and his sheets were made from asbestos and he had to spray down his entire room with asbestos every day. Poor Johnny. The biggest threat to his life wasn't Dr. Doom. Turns out it would have been lung cancer. I mentioned how dumb it was that Wonder Woman would rather not be able to see than rip out her eyelashes, right? Because I really can't understate how shockingly dumb that was. Just really, really ridiculous. One of the best parts of this issue is when Etta uses the false form of Wonder Woman. She can't really have any candy because that would kind of give it away, and she is decidedly not pleased with this fact. Diana tries to tell her that being in this new body will feel perfectly normal, and she's all, no it won't because I won't have any candy. And then even after she spent some time in this beautiful athletic body, she says she hasn't had any fun and just can't wait to get back to normal. It's really great. And actually, reading here, I'm seeing that Naha was the one who was guarding her body while it was in a coma, and only a few panels before she was kind of betraying them to the Duke of Deception. But nothing actually comes of that. She doesn't harm Etta or even show up again for the rest of the issue, so kind of a dangling plot thread there. I loved how, you've got this Italian Count Crafty guy, and he's so charming and all the ladies love him. But then when he tries to turn the charms on Wonder Woman, she just completely sees through it and is like, yeah, no, not falling for it. I always love that in a story, when you've got someone who everyone is falling for, but then there's this one person who's too smart to be taken in. This little 2-page story at the end, obviously at the time it was meant to encourage buying war bonds, but what I found interesting was that the narration confirms that when she's flying into the invisible plane, to the people around her, it looks like she's just sitting in the air zipping around. I know people always make fun of the TV show for that, and silly me, I thought it was just some kind of, representation, here's how it looks to us watching through the screen, or in this case the panel, but in reality, the plane and everything inside is really invisible. But no, apparently it really is just the plane that's invisible, and everything inside can be seen clearly. I was doing some research and I realized that the Wonder Woman archives here that I have do not reprint the Wonder Women of History segment that would appear in the back of these issues, which I thought was kind of disappointing since I've heard a lot about those segments and they sounded pretty cool. But I looked it up and this issue talked about Clara Barton, the founder of the Red Cross, and the last one had a segment on the famous nurse Florence Nightingale. Anywho, this issue was ridiculously long and ridiculously wacky, but it did end up being ridiculously enjoyable, so I'm giving it 4 stars. Next up, we have Wonder Woman Volume 2, Issue 15, Swan Song. Cover date was April 1988. George Perez did the story and layouts, Len Wein did the script, Bruce D. Patterson did the finishes, specifically for pages 4 to 22. John Costanza did the lettering, Carl Gafford did the coloring, and Karen Berger was the editor. And I'm reading this from the Wonder Woman by George Perez Omnibus. Alone and silent, we see Diana riding to the shore of Paradise Island. Suddenly clouds gather and lightning flashes, and we see a face and welcoming hands appear from the storm, much like we've seen with the Olympians. Diana flies upward, and is astonished to see Superman, resplendent in all his glory. They embrace and begin to kiss when Diana wakes from her dream, startled. In bed at the Capitella's home, she thinks how her dreams are getting more and more vivid, blaming Morpheus, the god of dreams. She prays to Athena, asking for wisdom in dealing with feelings she never had among her sisters. She's frightened by the fact that people have been known to die for these feelings, and she wishes Julia were around to talk to. Midnight in Boston, we see there's been a break-in at the headquarters of Ogawa Electronics, which we're told is a fully owned subsidiary of HCA International. But after knocking out a guard, the armed intruder is stealing information, not merchandise, and we watch as, on a computer, he uses the access code Silver Swan to open a file on someone named Valerie Beaudry. He prints out a termination order for a Maxine Sterren book when he hears another guard come looking, so he hides on the ceiling, then swings down, kicking the guard away before making his escape. At Mindy Meyer's art department, the publicist is being shown a poster the size of a billboard turned vertical, showing a picture of Wonder Woman in front of a carnival. Skeeter LaRue, a man with a Georgia accent so thick you could use it to tar a roof, developed it for the upcoming Wonder Woman fair. Mindy loves it, and the two go off to celebrate with a drink, leaving behind Denny and Steve, the artists who actually made the poster. Denny is outraged Steve is letting the Georgian take credit for his idea, but he tells her it's not worth bothering with, since Mindy only ever listens to Skeeter anymore. We next see a woman waiting at a phone booth in Boston's Chinatown, having received a note from somebody named Val to meet her there in the dead of night. Suddenly, a car speeds out of the darkness straight at her, and she dives out of the way as it barrels through the booth. The woman tries to run down an alley, but the car follows, when suddenly a silenced gunshot takes out one of the tires, and it careens into a wall. Out of the wreckage steps a man, aiming a pistol at the frightened woman. Then someone yells out, in Chinese, and the assassin turns, firing into the smoke behind him. More shots answer, and he falls to the ground. Out of the fog steps the thief we saw earlier, but when the woman tries to thank him, he points his weapon at her, and fires. At the moonlit lake behind the Capitella's home, Diana is praying, now to Eros, in an attempt to understand her feelings. Vanessa approaches, and when she sees Diana praying, asks if she's nervous about tomorrow's fair. The girl says she's there to help since her mother is spending time with family in Greece, and that her classmate Barry will be joining her at the fair. The scene shifts to a log cabin, where the woman from Chinatown, who we learn is Maxine Sterren, awakens to find herself handcuffed to a bed. The thief is there, mentions he used a tranquilizer dart on her, and introduces himself as Solomon. He tells her the man who tried to kill her was sent by the Silver Swan, whom she knows as Valerie Beaudry. She doesn't believe him, saying Valerie is her truest friend. She recounts how, as a kid, she responded to Val's ad for a pen pal in a magazine for teenagers. Although they only communicated via letter, the two became fast friends, sharing everything with each other, except when Maxine included a photo in one letter and Val never sent one in reply. When she came of age, Maxine wanted to meet face to face, but when she went to the post office that contained Val's P.O. box, she waited for days for her friend to arrive, only to learn that the girl had moved and not left a forwarding address. Maxine ended up living in Boston, when several months ago she got a phone call out of the blue, claiming to be from the friend she had lost contact with nearly 7 years before. Val was in town with her boyfriend and wanted to meet up, and when Maxine arrived at the swanky address, she was astonished by her friend's beauty, all platinum blonde hair and fashionable, for the 80s, dresses. The two were overjoyed to see each other, but the same could not be said for Val's millionaire industrialist boyfriend, Henry Cobb Armbruster. He kicked Maxine out, and through the door she could hear him yelling and beating her friend. The two women were able to go out to lunch together behind Armbruster's back a few times, but Val's confidence was utterly gone. She took to wearing large sunglasses to hide her bruises, and would wish aloud that she were as beautiful as the Amazon princess she read about in the newspaper. Finally, Maxine was sent a letter saying Val was leaving her abusive boyfriend, and to meet up that night in Chinatown. Solomon tells her it was a setup so she wouldn't learn the truth, and shows her a 5-year-old photo of Valerie Beaudry, a Quasimodo-esque figure with wild gray hair and warty reddish skin. He explains that Val's parents, now dead, had both been irradiated during some early nuclear research. Their daughter had been experimented on, mutating to have the ability to produce sonic disruptions as part of a project called Silver Swan, which Armbruster International planned to use for their own ends. Solomon showed Maxine a silent video of his father, cobbled together from footage that survived an explosion at an HCA lab in Alaska. It shows Professor Benjamin Buckman surviving the blast and trying to escape through the rubble, only to be tracked down by his creation, a woman who floated in the air and released a sonic scream that reduced the scientist to a smear. Turning off the TV, Solomon tells Maxine he's vowed to destroy this Silver Swan monstrosity, now under Armbruster's control. Speaking of the millionaire, we see him as the sun rises east of Boston, on the phone learning of Maxine's escape and the death of the assassin. He thinks she must know about their plans with the Wonder Woman fair, but says the crowds will make it impossible to find their secret weapon in time. An associate wonders if the Silver Swan will be able to handle Wonder Woman, and Armbruster replies that her anger at the Amazon, groomed by him, means that she will follow his every command. We next see Hanscom Air Force Base, where Steve is helping Etta take her weight. She's lost 35 pounds and is now within the military's guidelines, but still wants to take off another 20. He tells her that with all her exercising, she's becoming a real Wonder Woman, but the lieutenant, seeing a flyer for the fair and knowing Steve will be there alone, thinks to herself that there's no way she can compete. But at the fair, Steve is wishing Etta were with him, and wonders why Diana asked to see him after her performance. Vanessa and her friends run up, and they chat for a minute before taking off toward the stage. We see Skeeter proud of how the fair is doing better than expected, although the head of the charity they're raising money for is concerned that the cause of children in need is being ignored in all the excitement for Wonder Woman. An older woman goes up to the podium to introduce Diana, and we pan over the crowd, seeing Steve, Vanessa and her friends, and Solomon and Maxine. Wonder Woman flies in, and as she takes in the scene, she's both happy at their excitement and a bit embarrassed at the way her image is being exploited. But then there's a low hum, and Solomon says he knew her jealousy of Wonder Woman would guarantee an appearance, just before all sound is muted for just a second, followed by an ear-splitting screech that shatters the stage. Over the audience swoops Val, now gleaming on white wings and announcing herself to Boston as the Silver Swan, telling the crowd to obey or die. Maxine can't believe it, but when Solomon tries to make a move, he finds that one of the fair vendors is holding a gun to his head. Wonder Woman zooms toward the winged figure, trying to tell her they can talk, while she prepares her lasso. But the swan sweeps her wings forward, pushing herself away before there's once again a moment of silence, followed by yet another terrible cry. Wonder Woman and Maxine watch in horror as the blast hits the Ferris wheel in its hub, shattering it and sending the wheel and all its riders plummeting toward the ground. I was flipping back through the pages of this collection, and I came across the full-page panel in issue 10, where Wonder Woman first encounters Zeus, and I realized it is almost exactly the same as this full-page spread of her finding Superman in her dream. Which, given the fact that she mentions how, when she's around him, she was reminded of the Olympians, was a fitting touch. And it's a really great page, too. It's Superman in his classic costume, and his cape is massive and just kind of draped majestically around him and blowing in the wind. Wonder Woman and Superman have been a couple over the years, mostly in alternate future stories like The Dark Knight Returns and Kingdom Come. Although, and I probably should have mentioned this a couple episodes ago when I reviewed the New 52 issue 12, in Justice League number 12 that came out that same month, there was a cover that made a lot of headlines with Wonder Woman and Superman kissing. And DC made a huge deal about this. They teamed up with Match.com to create profiles for both Superman and Wonder Woman. And they had an anthropologist, quote-unquote expert on love and attraction, write up an article about how they were perfect for each other. They continued to date for, I think, pretty much the rest of the New 52. I know a little over a year later, in October 2013, you had the premiere of Superman Wonder Woman, the comic book that was specifically about their adventures and relationship. Personally, I don't really care for the pairing myself. Not so much for Wonder Woman's sake, but just because I think that Clark and Lois make such a great team that I don't ever want to see them split up, even if that means that he can be with Wonder Woman. In case you're not too familiar with comics, after 58 years of dating, Superman and Lois Lane did get married in 1996, and the relationship lasted for 15 years, until, of course, the universe got rebooted and DC decided to erase their marriage. People always try to say that Superman is unrelatable because he's so powerful, and DC has to try to humanize him. Like in the movie Superman Returns, they made him an unmarried father, and in Man of Steel, of course, he's all gloomy and dark. And I always try to argue that Lois being his wife is exactly what you need to make him more relatable. The two work perfectly as a team, supporting and caring for each other, and it's a shame that we don't get to see more of that. There was some stuff recently in comics with the DC Rebirth, where Superman and Lois from the old universe came back and they were married and now have a son. But at the time I'm recording this, that's all up in the air because of alternate timelines and merging universes together and all sorts of comic book craziness. The Silver Swan was originally a Wonder Woman villain from the early 80s. In that version, she was a ballet dancer named Helen Alexandros, who was kind of an ugly duckling. And so she made a deal with Mars that he would make her beautiful and give her power, and she would use that power to fight Wonder Woman. She has the ability to fly, although whether or not that's tied to the wings on her costume, I'm not quite sure. And she can generate destructive sound waves with her voice, kind of like Black Canary. I really liked Maxine's story about her friendship with Valerie. That was really touching. And you got a real sense of pathos for Val when you see how this, at that point, teenage girl looked. And you realize her appearance would just drive everyone away, and really long-distance relationships like with a pen pal would be the only kind that she could have. Again, we have this modern version of Etta who's concerned about her weight and thinks that she can't compete with Wonder Woman. It just really feels disappointing when you look back at 40s Etta and the way that she never even cared about trying to compete with Wonder Woman. It would have never even crossed her mind. She was so perfectly happy with who she was. We get confirmation here when Steve is talking to the kids that he has retired from the Air Force. Barry, Vanessa's not explicitly stated boyfriend, talks about how he knows that Wonder Woman thinks of Steve as a father figure. And honestly, the way this kid is kind of, well, I want to say fangirling, but obviously that's not really the right term, over Wonder Woman seems a little much. In fact, one of Vanessa's other friends tries to tell her that he only cares about Wonder Woman and doesn't really care about her. But of course she's like, nuh-uh, he loves me, even though he kind of only has eyes for Diana. So yeah, pretty good issue. Great cliffhanger ending here with this Ferris wheel starting to fall towards the ground. So I'm going to give it 3 stars. Next up is the New 52 with Wonder Woman Volume 4, Issue 14, Just Desserts. Cover date is January 2013. Executive editor was Bobby Chase. Cover artist was Cliff Chang. Writer was Brian Azzarello. Penciler was Tony Akins. Inkers were Dan Green and Rick Burchett. Colorist was Matthew Wilson, letterer was Jared K. Fletcher, and the editors were Matt Idelson and Chris Conroy. And I'm reading this from Wonder Woman Volume 3, Iron. It's still night in Antarctica, and we see footprints in the snow that lead to the giant, known only as Firstborn, who is standing alone, stock still like he has for the past 6 hours, being watched at a distance by the armed figures in parkas. The doctor, whose name we learn is Cassandra, tells a Mr. Butler how the giant ate the guy's brain in the last issue to learn English, and that they need to convince him that they can help him. She and 2 guards approach, and she tells the Firstborn it seems odd to stand waiting after being buried for 7,000 years. He grabs her up by the front of the coat, shocked at how long it's been, and when she mentions he was entombed, he explains that no, he has been tunneling his way out of the Earth's core, by hand, all these many centuries, but he didn't know just how long it'd been. He sets Cassandra down, and she tells him historians have very little records about his time, and none about him. He replies that was his father's doing, and she agrees that it was his father and uncle's, then calls him by his full title, Firstborn of Zeus. Back in Libya at the underground palace, Soraka throws Wonder Woman across the room, despite the Amazon saying she doesn't want to fight. She tries to tell the girl a child's life is at stake, but Soraka angrily whips up the fallen knives with her wind powers and decides to tell the intruder about her life as a child. We flash back to Palestine in 1917, where Soraka was shepherding the family flock when a mysterious woman in a peacock feather cloak appeared. She announced her name was Hera, and she knew the girl's father. As a storm formed around them, Soraka's mother came running to rescue her daughter, but the Queen of the Gods used her power over the elements to constrict the woman's throat, killing her with Darth Vader's signature move. She then turned on Soraka, summoning a sandstorm that ripped flesh from bone before even the girl's skeleton was ground to dust, scattering her consciousness around the world. Back in the present, the child screams that Wonder Woman is defending her murderer and sends the knives flying, but Diana ducks to avoid them, replying that Lennox hadn't told her the girl's story, and asking if he'd shared hers, how Hera turned Queen Hippolyta to clay as a sick, ironic joke. They then have a kind of back-and-forth argument, each listing the suffering Hera has caused them, and trying to one-up each other as they battle. Soraka watched her mother asphyxiate, Diana's sisters were turned to snakes, Soraka could only watch as her people aged and passed away, Diana had everything she loved taken away as punishment for Zeus's crime. Soraka asks why then she's protecting the goddess, and Diana explains that she must have hope that Hera will be able to undo her curse, no matter how unlikely everyone thinks it is. The girl then explains that her father, in an act of sympathy, restored her and, even though he was unable to return her life, gave her power over the element that had ended it. Diana answers that Zeus gave her nothing, except for this new family, Lennox and Soraka. She kindly takes the outstretched skeleton hands, explaining that the child she's trying to help is one of their siblings who was betrayed by Hermes, not Hera. She will find the babe, but even if Soraka can't aid in the search, she still wants to ease the child's loneliness, and Diana draws the scared girl into an embrace as she declares that sisters shouldn't argue like this. On Mount Olympus, Artemis shows the mark that Wonder Woman's fist left on her face to the assembled divine children of Zeus. Ares is amused, but when Apollo tries to say that the threat the Amazon poses is no laughing matter, War counters that it's really only a threat to the sun god. When it comes down to it, he would happily fulfill the prophecy by murdering any of his siblings, except for the beautiful Aphrodite and the useful Hephaestus. He then walks out, and Apollo says that as everyone else's invitations said, Ares has gone mad. He gives Dionysus the task of following the god of war, and then we switch back to Antarctica, where the firstborn asks if any record from his old life is waiting for him. Cassandra explains that everything about him was erased from the record, and when he wonders how she knew about him, she explains that it's thanks to the witch who prophesied about him on the day he was born. We get another flashback, and see that Zeus's pride caused him to reject his rightful heir, ordering the witch to kill the babe. His mother Hera begged the woman to save the child's life, and while she had to obey Zeus, the witch had compassion towards the queen, and didn't kill him outright, instead leaving the child alive to be eaten by wild animals in, well, okay, it says the desert, but it looks like the African plain to me. But the baby was evidently already able to use his divine power, and we see the hyena that came for a snack instead tried to comfort him. Returning to the Antarctic shore, the firstborn confirms the story is true, and Dr. Cassandra explains they learned it from discovering the witch's mummy in Turkey and translating the tattoos that covered her body. The doctor also knows the location of the firstborn's weapons and armor, but first he says he's waiting for a sign that will show him who now holds his stolen birthright. Just then the sun crests over the ocean horizon, and he realizes it must mean the thief is Apollo. Now walking the dunes outside the underground palace, Soraka says she trusts Wonder Woman, although the Amazon shouldn't do the same with Hera. She agrees to help, saying that if Hermes speaks of the child, she'll let Wonder Woman know. When Diana asks how she can do that, the girl reminds her that the wind carries words, and she commands the wind. She's blown up into the sky, and we see her surrounded by dozens of snippets of conversation. But when she returns to the ground, she reports that either the messenger god is keeping quiet, or is beyond the realm Soraka can hear. She recommends asking their brother Milan in New York for his help, though she mutters that he has trouble even helping himself. She asks Wonder Woman to apologize to Lennox for her, and to say she was wrong to stop talking to him. But as she walks away, Diana replies, with a smile, that he'd probably like to hear from her himself. We cut to a dark room, lit only by strange zigzag lines glowing from some kind of holographic computer screen. The guy with the sci-fi looking winged helmet that we saw going through the red tube back in issue 12 enters the room, asking why the Highfather wants to speak to him. A silhouetted figure with thick white hair and beard tells Orion that the sum of all knowledge in the universe, known as the Source, has detected something very dangerous. Orion is confident that he can put a stop to it, but the Highfather is afraid, and apparently that is a big deal. It seems the source has found something that could destroy it, and we're told that the end of the source means the end of time. Orion asks where the threat is located, and he's told it's from somewhere he's a fan of. Planet Earth. So I did some research, and in mythology, there's no real consensus as to which child of Zeus was born first. It doesn't actually seem to matter that much. But from what I'm reading here, it seems like it would have been Athena. She was conceived by Zeus's first wife, Metis, but there was a prophecy that Metis' first child would be a daughter, and then her second child would be a son who would overthrow Zeus the same way he'd overthrown Cronus and Cronus had overthrown Uranus. So what Zeus did, and I'm not sure if this is just after he heard about the prophecy or after he heard that she was pregnant or how exactly that works, but he just straight up opened his mouth real wide and swallowed her. Kind of like a snake, I guess. But then a while later, Zeus developed this horrible headache. So Hephaestus came and literally cut into his head with an axe, and out came Athena, fully grown and fully armed, ready for battle. Now, there was some time between him swallowing Metis and giving quote-unquote birth to Athena, but we don't know how much, probably a lot more than the normal 9 months. So it's very possible that he had more children in the interim. Actually, I'm going back here reviewing and editing, and I realized it would have had to have been a very long time, since Hephaestus, or Ares or Hermes, depending on which legend you're reading, either way, they're all children of Zeus. I think the only legend about who could have done it before the other kids were born would be Prometheus. So that would make Zeus's eldest child one of Themis's kids, which means it would be either one of the Fates or one of the Seasons, who all happened to be women. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled programming. His second wife, Themis, had 9 children. His third had another 3. He turned into a bull to seduce Demeter, and she gave birth to Persephone. His fourth wife was Mnemosyne, and she was the mother of the 9 muses. And then Leto, of course, gave birth to Apollo and Artemis. Finally, we get to Hera, the 5th wife. Even if you consider all of the children before her as illegitimate, her first child, it seems, was Hebe, the goddess of eternal youth. It wasn't until her second child that she gave birth to a son who could theoretically claim the right to the throne, and of course, that one was Ares. Hera's killing, or I guess attempted killing, of Soraka was pretty gruesome, but completely in keeping with her character. And I don't know why I didn't make the connection before that Hera turning Hippolyta into a statue meant that she was turning her into clay, just like the, in this version, fake Birth of Wonder Woman story. But now that I realize that, it really just twists the knife even further. I love the way Wonder Woman ends the battle here with Soraka, saying that they're sisters and they shouldn't fight. It makes me realize that, I mean, she grew up on an island of sisters, but she's lost all of them now. And while she now knows of brothers in Lennox and sort of brothers in the male Amazons who work for Hephaestus, this is the first sister she's found in a very long time. Well, okay, unless you count Strife and Artemis, but they're not exactly the hug-it-out type. War here saying on Mount Olympus that he would be perfectly happy to kill any of his siblings except for Aphrodite and Hephaestus. That's because while she is still married to Hephaestus, Aphrodite had a very long-lasting affair with the god of war. The scene here with this firstborn guy as a baby and the hyena taking care of him instead of eating him brings to mind the story of Remus and Romulus from Rome, who were raised by wolves. And this sci-fi bit at the end here with Orion and Highfather. Orion really looks like Star-Lord from the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Although, I guess, technically, this comic was out more than a year before that movie, so probably not direct inspiration. As I've said, I really don't know much about the new gods, so this scene had a really great sense of mystery, and just a complete tonal shift from modernization of ancient Greek mythology to high-tech science fiction. So yeah, really liked this issue. Wonder Woman ending the fight peacefully was great, and Ares being blunt and kind of snarky enough to say, I'd be willing to just kill you all, was delightfully refreshing, so I'm going to give this one 4 stars. Alright, onto the TV show. Like I mentioned last time, the show moved from ABC to CBS in between seasons, and technically they retitled it The New Adventures of Wonder Woman, but I'm probably just going to keep calling it Wonder Woman just because that's easier. So we've got Season 2, Episode 1, The Return of Wonder Woman. Air date was September 16, 1977, starring Linda Carter and Lyle Waggoner. Fritz Weaver played Dr. Solano. Jessica Walter played Gloria Marquez. Beatrice Straight played the Queen. And introducing Brooke Bundy as Beverly Ryan and Norman Burton as Joe Atkinson. Today, and today being 1977, so really 40 years ago, but for them it's today, a private plane is flying over the Caribbean, carrying United States government security agent Steve Trevor, along with 2 nuclear engineers and 2 nuclear scientists. Steve tells his fellow passengers that the mission they volunteered for is both top secret and dangerous. In countries belonging to the Organization of American States, there have been 4 recent terrorist attacks, and they fear the attackers could be strong enough to take out a nuclear plant. The scientists and engineers are headed to a secret conference in Samara, located on the northeast coast of South America, to determine if it's possible to place and defend such a plant in that country. As Steve tries to hand out jumbled paperwork that he struggled to organize himself, since his assistant recently left the agency to get married, we see that the conversation is secretly being remotely monitored by Dr. Solano at his headquarters in D.C. Steve comments that they're flying over the Bermuda Triangle, giving a brief summary of the region's history of missing boats and planes, when suddenly the electronic devices on the plane start to malfunction. Steve goes to talk to the pilot, but then the steward who is serving coffee pulls out a gas mask and a small device that fills the room with knockout gas at the push of a button. Steve struggles with the man, managing to get his mask off, but it's too late as everyone on board, including the pilot and co-pilot, is rendered unconscious. The plane goes into a dive, and Dr. Solano tries to determine its exact location, but there's too much interference. We then cut to Paradise Island, where Diana and her cousin, Evadne, hear the plane as it's caught in the island's magnetic field, which takes control and lands it safely. Once it touches down, Diana enters, checking to make sure the unconscious passengers are alive, and is shocked to see a face she recognizes. She carries the man to the Amazon hospital, where the doctor says he'll be all right. Diana gazes into the familiar face, mind filled with images of the past. Then we see her and the Queen looking through the man's paperwork. He is Steve Trevor Jr., son of the late Major General Trevor, whom Diana worked so closely with 35 years ago. He's still sleeping, but the rest of the visitors have been questioned under hypnosis. The steward was supposed to take over the flight, then receive instructions from an international terrorist organization on where to land. The Queen recalls the Nazis her daughter fought against, but the princess says this new group is determined to overthrow all of the world's governments. Diana suggests she should return to man's world as an Amazonian emissary in order to combat this new global threat. Her mother flat out refuses, but when a vote is taken, the Amazons unanimously agree. However, Evadne challenges her cousin, according to tradition, to a friendly contest of bullets and bracelets. They each shoot at the 5 points of a sculpted star, the other trying to block the shots, and Diana proves victorious. She tells her mother that despite this, she'll stay if she wants her to, but the Queen replies that she's worried, but her daughter must go. The doctor uses hypnosis on the still unconscious Trevor to make him believe his new assistant will be waiting for them in Samara, and then we see the Queen retrieving her daughter's costume and accessories from a small reliquary and giving them to Diana. The feminine bracelets, the tiara with a ruby in the center of the star which will allow her to contact her mother, the costume with the belt that increases her strength, and the magic lasso that ensures both truth and forgetfulness. For the first time in over 3 decades, Wonder Woman spins into her costume. The Queen reminds her that without these objects she will be powerless as any mortal, repeats that she's worried but knows her daughter must leave, and the 2 women hug. On the plane, everything has been put back exactly the way it was when the gas hit, down to the position of the again unconscious bodies. The Amazon's magnetic field will return the plane to the sky, then Diana will play a tune on a small flute, releasing the passengers and crew from their hypnosis. Then jump over to her invisible plane, which will be following behind on autopilot, so she can arrive in Samara before them. Mother and daughter say a final farewell, and the Queen, like an ever-practical mom, gives Diana money in the form of ancient Syrian silver coins. The plan goes off without a hitch, and soon the private jet lands in Samara without realizing they've lost 2 days. From his headquarters, Dr. Solano is baffled when his hidden camera begins broadcasting again, and declares he'll meet them at their destination. We next see Steve and the nuclear experts meeting with a Samaran colonel who tells them about the lost time, and they agree a full investigation is necessary. Steve asks about the hijacker, who it turns out was only a hired gun, and the colonel takes Trevor to his new assistant, Diana Prince, where the hypnotic suggestion kicks in, making him believe her presence was planned. That evening, at the conference's first meeting, Steve meets Gloria Marquez, a Goranian representative. She schmoozes up to him while being unnecessarily dismissive of Diana, then calls the meeting to order, introducing the chair, Dr. Solano of the Republic of Guanarai. Diana comments privately to Steve how Solano means deadly nightshade in Spanish, and is considered unlucky. Then the doctor thanks the U.S. government for donating a nuclear power plant to the region. He asks about transporting and guarding the facility, but for security reasons, Steve doesn't want to give away too many details, saying only that the plant will be transported swiftly by air instead of on a slow, easily targeted boat. That night, Solano and Gloria are in the same hotel room, with him bemoaning the fact that he wasn't able to get any intel from Trevor. She replies that she'll try to learn more when she sees him in Washington, and the doctor goes on a rant about how he wants to control the plant to be able to disrupt power and start wars, destroying nations and leading to a new global order with him at the head, sure the bloodshed will be worth it for his glorious future of peace. A few days later in D.C., I try not to laugh as Diana Prince is showing the ultra-sophisticated computers used by the Interagency Defense Command in the late 70s. She's introduced to IRAC, also known as IRA, the computer that stores personnel files and is equipped with voice recognition. Kind of like if Siri and a Light-Bright got smashed together. Miss Prince's security check over, she pretends to leave, then sneaks back in using the code she saw the technician use and activates IRA. She commands the computer to enter a new file, then dictates her own profile. Diana Prince, age 25, went to school at Berkeley before joining the IADC Overseas Division 3 years ago, adding the detail that her college records were damaged. The AI objects, but she overrides its programming, plus tries to reason with it verbally. She has it look up a place where she can sell her coins, and manages to negotiate for $25,000 each, despite letting it slip that she knew the 2nd century BC king whose image is on their face. As she exits, we see that she's being watched by Gloria. Then Diana goes apartment shopping, commenting how expensive everything is since the last time she was in Washington, despite getting a giant place for $500 a month. Seriously, she just got at least $150K, and it's not like she has to worry about renting a hangar for the invisible plane. Gloria reports to Solano that the rest of Miss Prince's day was spent shopping, but when he learns she paid for everything in cash, he thinks it's money from an agency fund, meaning she's more than just an assistant. He sends Gloria to bug Diana's apartment when she's out of the house, but their target comes home about a minute after the listening device is secured in the handset of her phone. The masked intruder threatens Diana with a gun, but when she sees it's a woman, the Amazon tries to appeal to her sisterhood. Surprisingly, this doesn't work, and the two tussle, with the intruder setting off another gas device before running out the door. The superhero spins into her costume, but Gloria is gone, so she calls Steve to report the incident, with Solano already listening in. The next morning, at the headquarters of the Interagency Defense Command, Diana meets Beverly Ryan, the secretary, and is shown her office. She doesn't have much time there before Steve arrives, introducing her to Joe Atkinson, the head of the agency, and informs her they have to rush off for an Air Force briefing. Gloria has set up an ambush, however, and they're run off the road by 2 cars. The occupants jump out and move in to attack, so Steve tells Diana to run while he holds them off. Once far enough away, she spins into her costume, then goes back, pulling the men off the dazed Steve just as they were trying to replace his watch with the duplicate. Gloria, watching from a nearby car, films the amazing Amazon with the 1970s equivalent of a camcorder, as she scares the men away by bending one of their guns with her bare hands, then keeps them from escaping by holding onto the bumper of both their cars. They flee on foot, but she manages to stop one by taking off her tiara and straightening it into a boomerang, with which she trips up one unlucky man before wrapping her lasso around him and demanding the truth about the dropped watch. Wonder Woman returns to help Steve up off the ground, and he's more than a little surprised at the sight of her. She explains about the watch and that the replacement was bugged, and when she proclaims she's sure the attackers didn't know anything else, Steve Jr. recalls the lasso she always used in his father's stories. He's heard the tale since he was a small child, but he finds it hard to believe that she's the same woman because she looks so young. She shares personal details about his father, like a scar he had on his shoulder, and confides that she's 2,526 years old, which he accepts, although he doesn't seem to believe it. She says she's here to help him now, whatever he needs, and he replies that he's looking forward to getting to know her better. In Solano's headquarters, he and Gloria are reviewing the tape of Wonder Woman. He's sure her powers are part of some kind of IADC experiment and wants to capture and study her, though he believes she's too dangerous to allow to live. Gloria turns up newspaper clippings from the 40s, as well as Nazi documentation talking about how dangerous Wonder Woman was. Solano, however, has gotten it into his head that she's not a real woman and is in fact a super powerful robot. He reveals a fencing droid he's invented that's powered by a miniature nuclear reactor, which he plans to send after Wonder Woman. If she proves stronger, however, he's rigged the reactor to detonate, ensuring the destruction of the Amazon as well as a large part of the surrounding area. Steve and Diana are in his office, going over the plans for transporting the reactor, when Beverly announces via intercom the arrival of the Guanarayan representative. Diana takes the plans to her office, and thinking he's being visited by Solano, Steve tells the secretary to let him in. He turns out to be Gloria, who wanted to make sure Trevor was coming to the embassy party that evening. He says he's busy working out the details of transporting the plant, but she convinces him to stop by, if only briefly. She says that the party could be fun, then wraps her arms around his neck and kisses him, saying when they pull away that she's making sure he realizes she's not a he. She leaves and Diana re-enters, but then Gloria pops her head back in to tell Steve it's a black tie event, and awkwardly stares at the assistant, eventually inviting Diana as well. After the woman finally leaves, Diana comments that she seems familiar, and not just from the conference. We return once again to Solano's headquarters, where doctors are finishing up surgery on a man with bandages over his face. They cut the wrappings away to reveal a perfect replica of the face of Steve Trevor, and they marvel at the perfection. At the embassy party, Gloria greets Steve and Diana, and tells Steve there's someone he has to meet. Leaving his assistant behind, he follows the woman into a separate room where he's jumped by two strong men, who hold him down while Gloria injects him with a sedative. They remove his jacket, wallet, and watch, and toss them to the waiting duplicate, who then rejoins Diana at the party. He tells her he needs to leave, but she should stay there as an official representative. He arrives at Blandings Air Force Base and has a briefing with the pilots who are flying the transport planes, telling them that plans have changed, and they're now delivering the nuclear plant to Guanare. He's ordering total radio silence. Even if they hear the president on the comms, they are to ignore what's being said. There is still a fail-safe word in case of emergencies, however: capsize. Dr. Solano will meet them when they land, and we see the doctor and Gloria boarding a private jet so they can get there before the cargo planes. Diana and the spurious Steve arrive at her apartment, and he asks about maybe making an exception to her teetotaling in celebration of the successful night. She remarks that she didn't tell him she doesn't drink, and he comes up with the excuse that he made an assumption before sitting down on the couch beside her and trying to make the night last even longer. She attempts to refuse politely, but already suspicious brings up his story about the scar on his father's leg. When he doesn't realize it was actually on Steve Sr.'s shoulder, she confronts the imposter, and he replies that he can't let her tell anyone else about him. He chases after her, but she manages to get into another room and slam the door in his face. She spins into her costume and exits through another door, looping around to confront the pretender. She yells at him to leave Diana alone, easily slamming him onto the floor when he tries to attack. Her lasso wrapped around him, he gives her Steve's location and the new destination of the transport planes. We next see Steve handcuffed in the basement of Solano's estate, with a guard taunting him. But then the door gets smashed in, and Wonder Woman leaps down the stairs, breaks the guard's gun in two, and shoves him off screen in an awesome bit that I wish I knew how to make into an animated GIF. She frees Steve and puts the cuffs on the guard, explaining that Solano is having the plant be delivered to a mine in Guanare, and it turns out Steve is familiar with the location, as it's one of the places they considered for the plant. Using the doctor's radio equipment, he contacts the cargo plane, but since he doesn't know the failsafe word, his orders are ignored. Wonder Woman tells him his duplicate, still tied up at Diana Prince's apartment, will know the correct word, and they can get to the landing site before the delivery in her invisible plane. At the Guanarayan airstrip, Solano and Gloria are waiting for the arrival when, after Wonder Woman leaps unseen onto the roof of the Radio Shack, Steve walks up. At first they think it's their imposter, but then Wonder Woman makes herself known. She blocks a bullet from Gloria's gun, then jumps down and grabs the doctor. But Gloria and the rest of the men are aiming their guns point-blank at Steve, so Solano offers an ultimatum. He and Wonder Woman will fence one-on-one. Steve points out it must be a trap, but she accepts, and when everyone lowers their weapons, the Doctor goes into a cave to get his swords. He returns and starts dueling with the Amazon, but then she nicks his forehead, and beneath the skin is the gleam of metal. Her next strike takes off the face, revealing Solano's robot in disguise. The real Doctor is still in the cave, along with Gloria, and when he sees Wonder Woman disarm his machine, he activates the reactor bomb. He and Gloria run down the cave, but the bomb's obligatory rapid beeping has clued Wonder Woman in, so she picks up the robot, yells for everyone to run, and throws it into the cavern where it explodes. Completely harmless to anyone who has a recurring role in this series. And really, that's all that matters. After the explosion, Steve and Wonder Woman hear the roar of the cargo plane's engine, so Steve gets on the radio and gives them the correct failsafe word, which they learned from his imposter back in DC. He orders them to land in Samara as originally planned, and the plane changes course. Steve tells the Amazon that they've prevented an international incident and stopped Solana once and for all, but she's not so sure. Back in Steve's office, he gets off the phone with the White House, having told them that Wonder Woman appears on her schedule, not when they call. He tells Diana, who just entered, that the president would like to give the superhero a medal, but she replies she doesn't think Wonder Woman is interested in that sort of thing. Instead, she believes she returned to help, and when Steve says he hopes she appears again soon, Diana responds that he can be sure of it. Alright, massive jump from the 1940s to the 1970s, 35-year jump, pretty huge. They also changed the Wonder Woman costume when they switched over. Most notably, the eagle on the bodice is redesigned, and the belt is kind of now incorporated into the costume, not a separate piece. They redesigned her briefs, too, giving the legs more of an angle to try to avoid the diaper look that the previous ones had, and reducing the number of stars. The feminine bracelets are now a gold tone instead of silver to match her tiara, and I'm pretty sure the ruby in the center of the star on her tiara is new as well. We also have a redesigned invisible plane. This one looks a whole lot more like a jet, which is appropriate seeing as jets were a whole lot more common in the 70s than the 40s. There's even a new version of the theme song, which is going to take some getting used to. I knew that they were replacing Steve with Steve Jr. so that they could keep Lyle Waggoner, but I was genuinely surprised how sad it was that poor Steve Sr. kind of just gets killed off from old age in a single casual line. Although it is good to know that he did eventually reach the rank of Major General. There's no real explanation as to why Diana left 30 years ago. What with the last episode ending with her and Drew going off to celebrate the 2000th anniversary of the Amazons landing on Paradise Island, you could almost think that she went home and never came back. But Gloria, when she's doing her research, does say that Wonder Woman was active from 1942 to 1945, so I guess she just got to the end of the war and said, "Okay, that was fun, so long." As I said last time, we don't see Drusilla anywhere on Paradise Island, and the Queen is now played by Beatrice Straight. She was an Oscar-winning actress. She got the award for Best Supporting Actress for Network in 1976, and it says here that her performance was the shortest ever to win an acting Oscar, because her character was only on screen for just over 5 minutes. You probably know Jessica Walter, who played Gloria, as the voice of Mallory Archer on Archer, although I'm more familiar with her from the 90s Dinosaurs sitcom, where she did the voice for the mom dinosaur. The confirmation of Wonder Woman's age is interesting, since she's over 2,500 years old, and 35 years before this episode they were celebrating the 2000th anniversary of the Amazons arriving on Paradise Island. I think this may be the only version of the character that I've come across where she wasn't born on Paradise Island. Although, if she's claiming to be 25, let's be generous and say that the then-in-his-40s Lyle Waggoner is playing a 35-year-old. That means he would have already been born back in 42 when the first season happened. So, yeah, a little odd that that never came up. One part that was kind of fun, When the doctor was treating Steve, she automatically called him she, since she's so used to only treating women patients for the last 2,035 years. And I couldn't help but notice that in one scene, this fly just straight up landed in poor Linda Carter's hair. That's what you get with modern video quality. I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have been visible back in the 70s. Reminds me of I was watching an old episode of Star Trek, and they said, oh, this planet is uninhabited, there's no life whatsoever. And then with the DVD, you could clearly see bugs buzzing around Captain Kirk. As completely ridiculous as the fencing robot was, I really did like its battle with Wonder Woman. At one point, she got disarmed, and she was stopping the sword strikes with her bracelets, which was really awesome. The rule in TV is always, if you don't see the body, they aren't dead, and we didn't get actual confirmation that Solano and Gloria were gone, so Diana is kind of wary. The way she talks, you almost think like there was plans to bring them back at some point. But no, they never did. This was their only appearance. But they did both return recently in the Wonder Woman 77 Meets the Bionic Woman comic that started last December. So that's pretty cool that they had that callback to the show. And not only does it make sense that they would bring him back, since he's clearly an expert in robotics, but they also had Gloria become that universe's version of Dr. Cyber. Anyway, while this episode did have its moments, I'm still kind of disappointed that we lost the 40s style and setting, and that Steve Sr. was just discarded so abruptly. Plus, it was especially wacky and all over the place, especially with that robot just coming out of left field toward the end. So I'm going to give this one 2 stars. Well, now that we've got that out of the way, we can finally move on to the main event, the Wonder Woman movie! Yay! Now, I'm going to split this into 3 parts. 0 spoilers, where I talk about the movie as a whole. Minor spoilers, where I cover stuff that you learn fairly early on in the film. And full spoilers, which is where we get into all the endgame stuff. Okay, so for general, non-spoilery thoughts. It was good! Really good! Gal Gadot does a great job bringing across Diana's compassion, her sense of justice, her drive to always do what's right, and her warrior spirit. Chris Pine did a fine job as Steve, never talking down to Diana and always patiently helping her come to terms with Man's World. The fight scenes were great, Paradise Island was breathtaking, and seeing the horrors of war through Diana's eyes was definitely effective. I saw the movie with my mother, who's not into superheroes, and she thoroughly enjoyed it. Definitely a good introduction for people who don't know much about Wonder Woman. That being said, longtime fans may find the actual story a bit on the bland side, as the origin and lore were simplified. But that's for more spoilery sections to cover. If I had to sum it up in 3 words, I'd say good, but safe. Now, if you want to skip the next section where we go over spoilers, just jump ahead to 1 hour and 29 minutes, and that'll get you where you want to go. People who want to hear more details, but still not stuff from the end of the movie, keep listening. Alright, so the origin was super simplified. There's nothing about the Amazons being sculpted from clay or reincarnated, no Hercules, no details about their captivity at all, just saying that they were captured and Hippolyta led them to freedom. I think the biggest change has to do with the Greek pantheon. Ares killed all the gods except for Zeus. Then he and the thunder god clashed, and Zeus sent him packing but was fatally wounded. So he created Themyscira for the Amazons and gave them weapons to defeat Ares should he ever rise again, specifically the God-Killer sword. We hear the Queen telling young Diana about sculpting her from clay, but the way she says it, it was obviously a fairy tale, like telling a kid about babies coming from the stork or being found under a cabbage leaf. The Amazons were a lot of fun, but we only really saw them being warriors and not really anything about them being more peaceful or dealing with philosophy. Plus, I'm pretty sure that for all the ones who have names in the credits, the only Amazon besides Diana and Hippolyta whose name we actually heard was Antiope. And then they called her General and didn't even mention that she was Hippolyta's sister. I know Philippus and Artemis were supposed to be there, but they were never called out by name. There weren't really any Easter eggs or references for the fans in this movie, but they did pull pieces from the various takes on the origin. For example, we see the Amazons coming up out of the ocean, like in Perez's origin, and when Diana's a kid, she secretly trains to be a warrior, like in the New 52. Only this time it's with Antiope instead of Ares. I did find it kind of funny that the elements that they chose to use in the origin were pretty much the exact ones that I skipped over in my fanfic from a couple months ago, and vice versa. At first I was taken aback at how the magical barrier only hides the island. It doesn't actually keep anyone out, but I guess that makes sense if the gods aren't around anymore to let Steve specifically in and no one else. No one cared about or even mentioned the rule about men not being allowed to set foot on Themyscira, which is probably a good thing because that rule was broken rather quickly. And not just by Steve. In this one, the golden lasso is called the lasso of Hestia. Why that's specifically the goddess of the hearth, I'm not sure. And look, at this point, it's way too late, or actually kind of early, to spend a lot of time researching why they would have chosen that specific god. And I mean, technically speaking, it's not really a lasso. There's no knot or loop. Diana just twirls it and it wraps around people, like a rope with a small weight on the end. Behind her daughter's back, the queen was constantly making comments about, oh, she must never discover what she truly is. And I know I've said I'm not a fan of when Diana is treated differently than the other Amazons because she was sculpted from clay. So it was really kind of disturbing to hear her own mother say, no, you're not an Amazon. You don't get to go to man's world to fulfill our mission. Even though I know she was really just trying to protect her. They make a point of Diana being able to speak a ton of languages. And she says that's specifically because the Amazons chose to study them. But they never explain how they're able to study modern dialects, since there's no magic sphere or anything like that. We do entirely skip the contest. Instead, they just had her take weapons and armor like in the Justice League cartoon. I am glad that Diana got a goodbye scene with her mother, but the way Hippolyta said that she may never return was kind of vague, thanks to Connie Nielsen's faux Israeli or quote-unquote Amazonian accent. Did she mean that Diana wouldn't be allowed to come back, or she might not be able to? Really, you could hear it both ways. I get that this was kind of the point, but Diana saying that all she had to do was kill Ares and the war would stop made her look incredibly naive and kind of gullible, especially when she had just repeated the fairy tale version of her being sculpted from clay. Dr. Poison worked really well for the setting, seeing as how big of a horror mustard gas was back during that period. Etta was great for the 2 scenes that we saw her. Okay, maybe it was 4, but I still wish she'd been in the movie a whole lot more. There really wasn't a whole lot of specifically pro-women themes in the movie. There was like a little bit of, hey, get that woman out of the war council chambers, but it was a whole lot less than, say, the first season of Agent Carter, which is kind of odd when you think about it. The 3 guys that she and Steve teamed up with were really great, well-done characters, but I kind of wish they'd found a way to make them somebody from the comics instead of coming up with brand new characters. Honestly, they were way too similar to the Howling Commandos from the first Captain America movie. My favorite scene is easily when they're in the trenches, and Diana finally puts on her tiara and reveals her armor, and leads the charge across no man's land. I was grinning the entire time. Oh, and I should mention, there's nothing after the credits. They announced that a few weeks ago, but I stuck around just in case, and I can confirm there's no teaser for Justice League or anything like that. Okay, moving on, and this is for all the spoilerific marbles. Again, if you want to skip it, go ahead and fast forward to 1 hour and 29 minutes. Let's tackle the biggest one first. So, you know how in the New 52 they simplified Diana's origin by, instead of having her blessed by the gods, she was actually a demigod? Well, this movie simplifies it even further by chopping off the first half of that. She's straight up an Olympian god. The sword is useless against Ares because it turns out only a god can kill a god, so she, the last baby daughter of Zeus, when Ares decided to kill the rest of the family, is the god killer that the Amazons were given to protect the world. Yeah. They don't actually say who her mother was, but for the fun of it, let's just guess that it was Hera. That makes her a full-blooded sister of Ares, and she actually does call him brother right before the end. Speaking of Ares, it was kind of disappointing how I had the twist that it was actually David Thewlis spoiled just from paying attention to the news about the movie, even though I was trying really hard to avoid spoilers. But my mother, of course, doesn't follow comic book news, so she said the twist actually worked, which is really good. The design of his armor was great, really influenced by Perez's Ares, but I kept waiting for him to grow into a giant, thanks to that Lego set where he's like a mega-sized Lego figure, and it never happened. The bit where they replay the scene where Steve's saying goodbye when Diana's been deafened was a bit strange. Were we, supposed to understand that she was lip-reading after the fact? And, for a movie that changed its setting to avoid being compared to Captain America, it was a bit strange that they decided to have the male lead do the whole heroic self-sacrifice shtick on a plane to keep the ultra-deadly new weapon that it was carrying from destroying one of the world's biggest cities. Just a thought. So, my concern with the movie having a downer ending turned out to not be true, but then you've got the problem of no one knowing who Wonder Woman is until Doomsday's attack in Batman v Superman. I mean, I get that she keeps saying she used to want to save the world, but are we really supposed to believe that the immortal Greek warrior goddess who worked so hard to end suffering chooses to sit out World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, the Gulf War, the Rwandan genocide, and who knows how many other atrocities during the next 100 years? It really doesn't seem like she returned to Themyscira, if she even could, since there's no reason she would have come back to man's world afterwards. So, yeah, it was absolutely a good movie, and I'm really glad that everyone's excited about it, but since I've been so immersed in Wonder Woman for the past year, it kind of feels a bit weak on the stuff that makes the character so memorable. Instead, it chooses to strip everything down to bare bones for the newbies. In fact, and I didn't realize this until I saw the credits and noted that Gal was only listed as Diana, they never actually say Wonder Woman once in the entire movie. But look, it's late. Or early by now. And I'm still processing all of this. I've got a second viewing scheduled for Friday evening, and in my experience, that will definitely help my perspective on things. I know with The Force Awakens, the first showing, my mind was so busy trying to analyze everything, but then the second time I saw it, I already knew where everything was going, so I could just relax and enjoy it more. Anyway, I'm sure there will be lots more discussion about the movie in the next few episodes, so stay tuned. Speaking of which, and let me give credit where credit's due, Catherine on Facebook had a really great idea. For people to send in their thoughts on the movie for me to read on next month's episode. I figured, yeah, it'll be a fun listener interaction sort of thing. So, if you're interested, email your reviews to WonderWomanWarriorForPeace@gmail.com, and I will read them on next month's show. In fact, if you want to just record yourself and send an MP3, that'd be really cool. Just please remember to keep it G-rated, since it's really important to me to keep Warrior for Peace a family-friendly show. Okay, back to the pre-recorded bit, and on to the news. Couple of things that I forgot to mention last time. The script for Joss Whedon's cancelled Wonder Woman movie is now available to read online. 10 years ago, the creator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer was supposed to come out with his own Wonder Woman movie, but unfortunately it was cancelled. He then went on to direct The Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron for Marvel, and it was recently announced that he is going to take over directing the reshoots and post-production of Justice League from Zack Snyder, since Zack and his wife, producer Deborah Snyder, had to bow out after a horrible, horrible family tragedy. I haven't read the script yet. I'm going to do that after I see the movie that we are getting. Remember, this section is pre-recorded. But I was a huge fan of what he did with the Avengers, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. Also, the Wonder Woman race car that was driven by Danica Patrick that I talked about a couple episodes ago, unfortunately, it was in a really horrible, awful, fiery crash during a race. Miraculously, Danica was unharmed, as was driver Joey Logano. Eric Almirola, however, had some partially crushed vertebrae in his back and ended up in the hospital, but he has since been released and it seems will be out for somewhere between 8 to 12 weeks. So, sad that the Wonder Woman car was totaled, but it seems that instead of being scrapped, racer Dale Earnhardt Jr. has decided to keep it in his car graveyard. In other news, the Wonder Woman movie premiered in Hollywood, and Gal Gadot and Linda Carter were both there. Got some great pictures of them together. And the movie soundtrack has pre-released 2 songs that you can listen to. Of course, by the time you're listening to this, the entire soundtrack will be released, but it's still pretty cool to be able to hear these couple of songs ahead of time. Also, the YouTube series Man-at-Arms Reforged, where a team of blacksmiths, or swordsmiths, I guess, make real versions of weapons from movies, TV, cartoons, and video games, have 2 new videos for the Wonder Woman movie. In one, they made her shield, and the other, they made her sword. I know, slightly disappointing that they did those instead of her more iconic weapons, but hey, maybe they can do her lasso and bracelets if the film gets a sequel. And the Double Clicks music video for Wonder that I talked about last episode has been released. It's pretty sweet, so definitely check that one out. As always, I will include links to all of these in the show notes, and you can view them on the website wonderwomanwarriorforpeace.wordpress.com. And once again, we have reached the end of the episode. If you have any questions, comments, complaints, concerns, conundrums, or queries, you can email me at wonderwomanwarriorforpeace@gmail.com. Let me know if you're okay with your message being read on the podcast. The show's homepage is wonderwomanwarriorforpeace.wordpress.com. There you can find the RSS feed and promo, as well as show notes and links to the iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play feeds. You can look up the show on Facebook, YouTube, Tumblr, and Instagram under Wonder Woman Warrior for Peace, and on Twitter and Pinterest as Wonder Woman WFP. The show's intro music was Wonder Woman Theme, the Best Themysciran Symphony Dialogue Dance Mix by Taz Damien Devil. You can watch the full video on his YouTube channel. And the outro music is Wonder by the Double Clicks, and you can find them on their website at thedoubleclicks.com. Next episode, I will be reviewing Sensation Comics Volume 1, Issue 13, Wonder Woman Volume 2, Issue 16, Wonder Woman Volume 4, Issue 15, and Wonder Woman Season 2, Episode 2. But until then, remember, sisters, hopes may fade, but wonders never cease.
'Cause you're not a quitter, you still believe the truth's in your lasso, your heart's on your sleeve, and when we're drowning in darkness, you'll save us all from going under, and we'll watch you in